It was a crisp autumn evening in the quaint town of Ravenwood, nestled deep in the heart of Pennsylvania. The leaves had turned vibrant shades of red and gold, creating a picturesque yet eerie backdrop. My name is John Harris, and this is the account of my descent into the darkest recesses of the human soul. The day had started like any other. I kissed my wife Emily goodbye, grabbed my briefcase, and headed to work. The drive was uneventful until a flash of headlights blinded me, and everything went black. When I regained consciousness, I was no longer in my car but in a strange, dimly lit place that felt neither here nor there. I later learned I had been in a coma for 3 months. During the coma, I experienced something beyond explanation. I found myself in a void, surrounded by whispers and shadows. There were moments I could swear I felt hands gripping my body, pulling me into darkness. It wasn't a dream. It was real as the life I once knew. One figure stood out among the shadows, a man with hollow eyes and a sinister smile. He spoke to me in riddles, each word laced with malice. "You don't belong here, John," he would say, his voice echoing in the void. "But here you are, and here you will stay." As I struggled to wake up, the line between reality and the shadowy world blurred. I saw glimpses of Emily by my hospital bed, her face etched with worry, and heard the faint beeping of the machines keeping me alive. But the Shadowman was always there, watching, waiting. The day I finally awoke, I was drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. Emily was there, tears streaming down her face as she hugged me. "John, thank God you're awake," she cried. But my relief was short-lived. The Shadow Man's words haunted me, and I knew my ordeal was far from over. Adjusting to life after the coma was more challenging than I had anticipated. Physically, I was weak, my muscles atrophied from months of inactivity. But it was the mental scars that cut the deepest. The Shadow Man's words lingered in my mind, an unsettling reminder of the darkness I had encountered. Emily was my rock during this time, her unwavering support keeping me grounded. "You're safe now, John," she would often say, her eyes full of concern. But even she couldn't understand the depth of my fear. My first night back home was restless. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind, sent shivers down my spine. I could feel eyes on me, watching, waiting. When I finally drifted off to sleep, my dreams were filled with the Shadow Man's sinister smile. The next morning, as I sipped my coffee and tried to shake off the remnants of my nightmares, there was a knock at the door. It was David, my best friend since college. He had been a constant presence during my hospital stay, and his relief at seeing me up and about was palpable. "John, it's good to see you, man," David said, clapping me on the back. "You gave us all a scare." "Thanks, Dave. It's good to be back," I replied, forcing a smile. But I could see the worry in his eyes. Over the next few days, I tried to resume my normal routine. I went for short walks around the neighborhood, trying to regain my strength. But the feeling of being watched never left me. It was during one of these walks that I encountered the first of many strange events. As I passed by the old Ravenwood cemetery, I noticed a figure standing among the tombstones. At first, I thought it was just a mourner, but as I got closer, I realized it was the Shadow Man. His hollow eyes met mine, and a chilling smile spread across his face. "You can't escape me, John," he whispered, his voice carried by the wind. I blinked, and he was gone. My heart raced, and I stumbled back home, trying to make sense of what I had seen. Emily was in the kitchen when I burst through the door, my face pale and sweaty. "John, what happened?" she asked, rushing to my side. I saw him, Emily. The man from my coma. He was at the cemetery," I stammered. She looked at me with a mix of concern and disbelief. "John, you were in a coma for months. It's natural to have some lingering effects. Maybe you should talk to someone, a therapist." I nodded, knowing she was right. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that what I had seen was real. That night, as I lay in bed, I resolved to find out the truth. I had to know why this shadowman was haunting me and what he wanted. The following days were a blur of doctor's appointments and therapy sessions. Dr. Mitchell, my therapist, was a kind woman in her late 40s. She listened patiently as I recounted my experiences, her brow furrowing with concern. "John, what you're describing sounds like PTSD," she said gently. "Your mind went through a traumatic event, and it's struggling to process it. These visions could be a manifestation of that trauma. But it feels so real," I insisted. "I can't just ignore it." "Then don't," she replied, surprising me. "But approach it with a clear mind. Keep a journal, document these occurrences. Sometimes, writing things down can help make sense of them." I took her advice to heart. Every night, I scribbled down my thoughts, my dreams, and any strange events. And the more I wrote, the more patterns began to emerge. It wasn't just in my mind. Something was happening, something I needed to uncover. My journal quickly became my most trusted companion. Each night, I poured my fears, my encounters, and my questions onto its pages. As the entries piled up, so did the evidence that something far beyond my comprehension was happening. One particularly stormy night, I decided to revisit the cemetery. Armed with a flashlight and my journal, I navigated the winding paths between the tombstones, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon me. I reached the spot where I had seen the shadow man, but there was nothing unusual. Just the silent, stoic graves of the long departed. As I was about to leave, my flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced across the ancient stones. That's when I noticed a grave that seemed older than the rest, its inscription barely legible under the moss and grime. I scraped away the dirt, revealing the name, Elias Hawthorne. The date of death was over a century ago, but what caught my attention was a single word etched beneath the name, beware. The wind howled, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I quickly snapped a photo with my phone and hurried back home, my mind racing with questions. Who was Elias Hawthorne, and why the ominous warning? I needed answers. The next day, I headed to the Ravenwood Historical Society, a small building filled with dusty records and forgotten artifacts. Mrs. Carter, the elderly librarian, was more than willing to help once I explained my interest in local history. "Elias Hawthorne," she murmured, scanning the shelves. "Ah, here we are." She pulled out a thick, leather-bound tome and flipped through the pages. He was a doctor, lived here in the late 1800s. Quite a controversial figure, it seems. As I read through the entries, a disturbing story unfolded. Dr. Hawthorne had been involved in experiments that many deemed unethical. Patients disappeared under his care, and whispers of dark rituals and occult practices surrounded him. He was eventually accused of malpractice and was found dead under mysterious circumstances, his last words a warning to those who dared to follow in his footsteps. This revelation sent shivers down my spine. Could Elias Hawthorne be connected to the shadow man haunting me? The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but I still had more questions than answers. That evening, I shared my findings with Emily and David. Emily was skeptical but supportive, while David's curiosity was piqued. "This is getting really strange, John," David said, pacing the living room. "But if there's any truth to this, we need to dig deeper. There might be more buried secrets in Ravenwood." Emily, ever the voice of reason, added, "Just promise me you'll be careful, John. I don't want to lose you again." I nodded, appreciating their concern. But I was determined. I needed to confront the Shadow Man and understand why he was haunting me. And for that, I had to uncover every piece of Elias Hawthorne's dark legacy. Over the next few days, David and I visited several locations tied to Hawthorne's history. We spoke to descendants of his patients, scoured old newspapers, and even ventured into the basement of the abandoned Hawthorne Manor. The deeper we dug, the more sinister the story became. Hawthorne had been part of a secret society that dabbled in necromancy, believing they could communicate with the dead and harness their power. They conducted their rituals in hidden chambers beneath the manor, where unspeakable acts were performed. Many of Hawthorne's patients had been unwilling participants, their souls trapped between worlds. One night, as David and I explored the manor's basement, we discovered a hidden room. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and at the center was an altar stained with what looked like dried blood. On the altar lay an old, leather-bound book. I picked it up, feeling a jolt of electricity course through me. The book was a journal, much like mine, but written in a language I didn't understand. As I flipped through the pages, I felt a presence behind me. I turned to see the Shadow Man, his hollow eyes boring into mine. "You've come far, John," he said, his voice echoing in the confined space. "But you are not ready for the truth." Before I could respond, he vanished, leaving me with more questions and a growing sense of dread. What was the connection between us? And what truth was I not ready to face? The mysterious journal we found in the basement of Hawthorne Manor was the key to unlocking the Shadow Man's secrets. Its cryptic symbols and ancient language were beyond my comprehension, so I sought help from Dr. Rebecca Caldwell, a professor of occult studies at a nearby university. Dr. Caldwell was intrigued by the journal. "This is remarkable, John. These symbols are part of an ancient language used in necromantic rituals. Translating it will take time, but I believe it holds answers to your experiences." Days turned into weeks as Dr. Caldwell worked on the journal. During this time, the supernatural occurrences around me intensified. I would often find myself waking up in the middle of the night, feeling an oppressive presence in the room. Emily noticed my growing paranoia and worry. "John, you're not sleeping, and these visions are getting worse. Maybe we should take a break from all this," she suggested, her eyes filled with concern. "I can't, Emily. I need to know what this Shadow Man wants." "Ignoring it won't make it go away," I replied, my voice tinged with desperation. David, ever the supportive friend, continued to assist me in the investigation. One evening, as we pored over old maps of Ravenwood, we noticed something peculiar. A series of underground tunnels connected the cemetery, Hawthorne Manor, and several other locations in town. These tunnels, marked with the same symbols found in the journal, seemed to be the epicenter of the strange occurrences. "We need to explore these tunnels, John," David said, excitement in his voice. "They might lead us to the truth." Reluctantly, Emily agreed to join us, her fear outweighed by her determination to see this ordeal through. Armed with flashlights and the partially translated journal, we descended into the dark, musty tunnels beneath Ravenwood. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the walls were lined with the same eerie symbols. As we ventured deeper, the oppressive feeling grew stronger. It felt as if the very walls were alive, whispering secrets and warnings. We reached a large chamber at the end of the main tunnel. At its center stood an ancient stone altar, identical to the one in Hawthorne Manor. The symbols on the altar glowed faintly, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. It was here that we made our most startling discovery. Dr. Caldwell's translations had revealed that Elias Hawthorne had attempted to bridge the gap between the living and the dead, using his patients as conduits. The rituals performed in this chamber were meant to summon a powerful entity, one that could control life and death. Hawthorne's journal ended abruptly, suggesting his final ritual had gone horribly wrong, trapping the entity, the Shadow Man, between worlds. As we absorbed this information, the temperature in the chamber dropped suddenly. The Shadowman appeared, his hollow eyes fixed on me. "You found the truth, John," he said, his voice a chilling whisper. "Hawthorne's failure trapped me here, and your near-death experience opened the door for me to reach you. But now, you must complete the ritual and set me free, or suffer the consequences." Fear gripped my heart as the Shadowman advanced. Emily and David stood by my side, their faces pale but resolute. "What do we do, John?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. I took a deep breath, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. "We need to finish what Hawthorne started. If we don't, this entity will haunt us forever." Using the journal, we prepared the ritual, following the instructions meticulously. The air crackled with energy as we chanted the ancient incantations. The symbols on the altar glowed brighter, and the Shadowman writhed in agony. As the final words left my lips, a blinding light filled the chamber. The Shadowman let out a blood-curdling scream and then, silence. The oppressive presence lifted, and the air felt lighter. We had done it. The entity was gone, and the curse of Elias Hawthorne was finally broken. But the cost had been high. As we emerged from the tunnels, the first rays of dawn breaking through the darkness, I knew our lives would never be the same. It was supposed to be a routine drive home, one I've done 1,000 times before. The moon was high, casting an eerie glow on the desolate highway. The radio played softly, the familiar tunes of classic rock, as my mind wandered to mundane thoughts. Little did I know, this night would forever change my life. Pain. That's the first thing I felt when I came to. My head throbbed, and I could barely move. The world around me was a blur of twisted metal and broken glass. My car, my trusted old Ford, was a mangled wreck. I tried to shift, but my leg was pinned, crushed under the dashboard. "Help!" I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. I reached for my phone, but it was shattered, much like my hopes of a quick rescue. As I lay there, struggling to stay conscious, I heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible over the ringing in my ears. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then it came again, clearer this time. "John." I froze. My name. Someone, or something, was calling my name. Panic surged through me, but I couldn't move, couldn't escape. I was trapped, both physically and now, it seemed, by something otherworldly. The hours dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. The pain in my leg was unbearable, and my vision blurred in and out of focus. Just when I thought I might lose consciousness again, a figure appeared in the periphery of my vision. "Hey! Over here!" I called out, my voice raw with desperation. The figure approached slowly, almost hesitantly. As it drew nearer, I could make out the features of a man, but there was something off about him. His clothes were outdated, and his eyes were hollow, empty. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he knelt beside the wreckage, his gaze piercing into mine. "You're not alone, John," he said, his voice echoing as if from a great distance. "But to leave this place, you must confront your past." His words echoed in my mind, filling me with dread. Confront my past. What did he mean? I tried to think, but the pain and the cold were making it hard to focus. As the night wore on, the supernatural presence became more palpable. Shadows moved in the corner of my eyes, and whispers filled the air. Suddenly, a memory flashed before my eyes, the day my wife left me. I had buried that memory deep, but now it resurfaced with startling clarity. The guilt, the regret, it all came flooding back. "John, is that you?" A woman's voice, clear and familiar. I turned my head, wincing in pain. There, trapped in the wreckage like me, was Sarah, a nurse I knew from the local clinic. Her eyes were wide with fear, but she was very much real, and she too was caught in this nightmarish ordeal. "Sarah, are you okay?" I asked, relief flooding through me at the sight of another living person. "I think so," she replied, her voice shaky. "But we need to get out of here, John. There's something wrong with this place." Together, we tried to come up with a plan. Sarah managed to find a piece of metal to use as a lever, and we worked together, ignoring the pain, to free ourselves. But as we struggled, the supernatural phenomena intensified. The whispers grew louder, and ghostly apparitions flickered in and out of view. "We have to keep moving," Sarah urged. "There's a legend about this place, something about spirits of the past." With Sarah's help, I managed to free my leg, but the damage was severe. We hobbled together, trying to find a way out of the twisted metal and the haunting presence. Sarah explained the local legend, a tale of a cursed road where countless souls had lost their lives. It was said that those who perished here were doomed to relive their final moments, trapped between worlds. "John, do you have any connection to this place?" Sarah asked, her voice urgent. I don't know," I stammered. But then, fragments of memories began to surface, a family secret, a tragedy that had occurred long before I was born. The spirits grew more aggressive as we neared the heart of the legend. The ghostly figure from before reappeared, his face twisted in anguish. "You must make amends," he intoned, his voice reverberating through the night. "How?" I shouted, desperation in my voice. "What do you want from me?" The figure pointed to a spot further down the road, where the remnants of an old bridge lay. "There," he said. "The truth lies there." With renewed determination, Sarah and I made our way to the bridge. The hauntings reached a fever pitch, but we pressed on. Finally, we reached the spot, and the full horror of the past was revealed, a family secret, a betrayal, and a tragedy that had bound the spirits to this place. As dawn broke, the spirits began to dissipate. Sarah and I were found by a passing driver, who called for help. As we were pulled from the wreckage, I felt a strange sense of peace. The truth had been revealed, and the spirits were at rest. But as we were taken to the hospital, a final, chilling revelation came to light. The figure who had guided us, the one who seemed so familiar, was me. Or rather, a version of me from a past life, forever tied to the tragedy of this cursed road.